Hey guys, thanks for tuning back into the channel. I'm Ruben from Camilla the 68 Cougar. Before we get started, please make sure you like the content that you're seeing and subscribe to the channel too to help me out as I'm making these videos. If you guys have any specific asks or want to see something specifically, drop them in the comments below and let me know so I can prepare something for you guys that you guys will enjoy. So in this segment here, if you guys have been watching my Instagram, labeled here at the bottom, I've had a couple of steps forward and steps back, so I am making progress in this section here to get this bad boy installed. Check out the rest of the video. So if you guys are looking to adapt an AOD into an early Mustang or Cougar like I'm building, you don't want to miss the content here because there's some good steps for you guys to follow, and I'll make sure that I point those out for you guys so you don't make a lot of the mistakes that I made. Okay, a couple of things that I'll cover here with the transmission that I bolted on. I'm using an aftermarket shifter by B&M. So there's a couple of things I needed to change on this for I can use that. There is some different directions that you can go if you're using the standard floor shifter that comes with our cars for the correct periods. But this one's going to focus on a B&M adaptation for the shifter. I'm using a quicksilver shifter that they have. And there's also instructions here, but I'm going to drop in the description of this episode. I'm going to drop in some comments here for steps to follow by Monster Transmission. I've never cracked open a transmission before, so I thought it was really helpful to find a good resource for those who are going to be tackling this type of transmission swap into your early Ford, Mustang, Cougars, you name it, the different variations that are out there. So big shout out to Monster Transmission for laying out the guides. If you guys want, definitely read the instructions that come from the manufacturers that I'll be stating shortly. But use Monster Transmission. They got a great step-by-step guide that I followed to give me the confidence to wrap this section up. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, guys, starting from the very back here, this is a slip yoke for the AOD. Obviously, it's very important to have this part. This is actually an OEM Ford slip yoke that goes attached to this AOD. And of course, you're gonna have to measure from here back to the back over there to get that measurement for the drive shaft. So that's one step there, obviously. And then here, this is the speedometer port. I got this plug from B&M. I'm not going to be using a standard speedometer type of cable that goes in here so then it can read to the gauges. If you guys have been watching my channel and following Instagram, I am going with a actual GPS type of speedometer system that's not going to use this, so this has been blocked off accordingly. Now, if we move on over here to this side, just want to point out that you're going to see a couple of differences. As I mentioned earlier, I'm not going to be using a couple of those items. So, for example, the shifter assembly, some of this is going to change. So you're noticing probably this part here. Let me just toggle this up here. So you see this part here. This is an attachment from B&M, and that part number there, I'm going to populate this at the bottom of the page for you guys. But it's essentially a retroactive kit so we can take advantage of the B&M shifters that require special rerouting and positioning of their shifter cables that goes and loops up to the top there into your actual shifter assembly. This part here is probably the biggest change to the transmission, what you have to do for the lever piece of that. To be able to adapt the B&M shifter, which is I'm using a quicksilver shifter, that I'm going to do is a little bit customizations. It's a universal kit, but I'm going to do something different with the console. But anyway, enough about that. So this part here, this is part of B&M, and you have to actually take apart the transmission and take out that shifter linkage. This is what the stock shifter linkage looks like. You have to take this apart here And again, there's a link on the description of this channel where in addition to the instructions from B&M, I decided to take a quick look. And again, Monster Transmissions has a great write-up on this. It's not specific to B&M, but it is specific about this linkage and swapping this thing out, so you guys install that accordingly. So this shifter here, again, this linkage here is from B&M. It's required to point down for this particular application for the AOD. This is the first time I've ever taken apart a transmission, and let me tell you, coming from a novice, I do have somewhat of a mechanical background over the years. I am not certified in anything. My day job is in banking, so take that for what it is. But for me, at least, I thought this was pretty simple swap as long as you're following directions of the guide and also that video that I have linked in the description. Now, the difference once you install this bad boy here, now, and I'll show you guys a little quick time lapse on that next. All right, cool. So you'll notice that this difference here, this is the TV cable here. This is actually a part from Lokar that they make specifically for the Ford AD to adapt into the early models. So you're gonna need to pick this part up. Specific to my application, here's a part number that I use for that. And it's specific for the AOD, the non-computer controlled AOD. I believe there's a couple of different variations of this cabling system. And again, this is for the kick down cable that goes associated with it, with the TV cable aspect of it. The install of this is pretty straightforward, and I thought it was pretty simple to set up. I wasn't sure when I was looking at the initial instructions. It seemed a little bit complex, but once you dive in, it's not that bad. So again, if I can do it, you guys can do it too as well. This is probably one of the easier things to do. Here at this section here, and I'll pan this over here, you get a spacer here to make sure that this whole cabling piece is aligned properly. You get a bolt and a washer, and you get the spacer here. Specifically for my transmission, and again, some of the castings might have varied over the years, and this is a 91 transmission, but some of the castings might have varied, and per the instructions and some of the videos that I saw, a lot of folks were just able to position this piece here, and I'm gonna move this a little bit forward for you guys. A lot of people were just able to just drop this in and no problem, and the bolt went right through that. I noticed that mine's a little bit shorter and stubbier, that it protrudes out from the transmission. So what I had to do is on one side, the side that's against the transmission, I ground down this spacer so then it was not rounded that meets against the casting here. So I had to sand that down or grind that down a little bit to make it flat. In addition, I took the washer and I made that flat too as well. And this arm here that holds the cable, I had to actually slice that down too to flatten it out, so that way it sat over the hole and it aligned correctly. Otherwise, if I didn't do that, this was protruding a little bit because I was touching the casting, so I wasn't able to easily slide the bolt in. So that's the only little issue that I had, but again, it was a really quick and easy fix. In addition, this arm here, or this right angle here, this one was straight, like completely straight. I had to bend this out further going this way, so then that way this cable was completely aligned with this. Otherwise, it was sitting like this, and per the instructions, they don't want you to do that. So that worked out well, and that came out good. And as always, when you're installing this piece here, the shifter linkage and the arm up here, please make sure to always double check that this actually goes and it returns back. Should be kind of a spring action there. So make sure that's all good there. Other than that, the next piece out here is just the actual cabling itself. And there's not much to show up here, because this is actually the piece that goes, this cabling, I just wrapped it up because I'm not going to put it on at the moment. This actually goes up to the carburetor or EFI system that you're using to hook up. Not going to do that right now. I'm currently awaiting a EFI kit from Ace's Fuel Injection, one of the build partners for Camilla's 68 Cougar. So that hasn't been released yet, but as soon as that is, I'll be doing another video to do an unbox and an initial review of that EFI system. So don't miss that out in the short future. Hope to have that for you guys. So the other piece I'll talk about real quick is the bottom oil pan. Okay. So if you guys know, the oil pans, they don't have a drain plug in them. You could, drill a hole and, I don't know, put a nut there and weld it on there and then put a bolt through it. That will work. Or you can opt for an aftermarket oil pan. This is one from Summit Racing. I decided to swap mine out because one, it was kind of beat up already. It was pretty dented, to be honest with you. And number two, it did not have a drain plug. And honestly, if you want to do some routine maintenance, even though those transmissions don't require a lot of intervals between changes, I think this one's between 50 to 100,000 miles in oil changes. Of course, you probably want to change those much earlier if you're doing a lot of spirited driving, just to keep things nice and fresh. So I got one with the drain plug, and I'll show you guys what that looks like. So that bolted in A-OK, everything was good there. It came with these 6-point type of heads for the bolts themselves. This bolted in perfectly too for the B&M cable to route through here and plug in here, so that way you can shift those gears. One last thing, this part here, you can't really see it too well, but it's a transmission mount piece. This came with the AOD kit that I bought, so this is going to go place there, and then of course the cradle that goes to the frame holds the tail end of the shifter there, or transmission I should say. And then next I'm going to flip this bad boy over, and we're going to take a look and see what I did to the actual oil cooler lines for the transmission. All right, you guys, so this is the other side of the transmission. These are where the plumbing goes into the transmission for cooling, for hookup for a oil cooler that's going to go up to the front of the car. I decided to go a step further here. Usually there's these small stainless steel or they're aluminum lines. I decided to go a little bit different routes. I ended up putting AN fittings here and here at the top for the, I believe this is outgoing, this is a return, one of the two. Always double check it. I probably should have marked them, but I'll just look them up because the top one goes one way and the bottom one's supposed to go the other way. It shouldn't be that hard to do. I got these fittings, these AN fittings on Amazon. They work pretty dang good from so far, so I'm hoping this actually holds up pretty well. Word of advice, always tighten them harder than you think, because I've read over and over on the internet that these things leak, because sometimes you think that as you're tightening them, you're good to go. Give them a couple more spins just to be extra sure so there's no leakage. These were actually cut to fit, and I ended up deciding to cut these in 1 foot lengths. I got the inspiration from Steve, Steve. Now I can't think of where he's from, but I'll put it down here in the comments. I ended up doing 1 foot lines here with AN fittings. This is braided lines with PFTE inside, so there has that plastic inside, which is great for oil and all that good stuff. And then I put some AN fittings here at the end too as well. That way I can easily do maintenance on it as needed, and I don't have to disconnect the entire piece. I could just cut it disconnect it from here, and off I go. And I can bring this down as needed for some of that maintenance. And lastly, the one thing I'll point out here, this is the dipstick hole. For our classic cars, at the time that I was searching for dipsticks, I didn't find one specifically for our classic cars to follow the right bends and so forth. I called a couple of different suppliers and nobody said they had any. I'm not sure if they do make one or not. You could probably double check with CJ Pony Parts, Stangaholics, and all those guys. But I ended up opting for a universal dipstick. It's a braided line, like what you saw here with these transmission lines that I have. I wish they offered a black one, because then it would have matched and it would have looked a lot nicer. But you know, it is what it is. I got this off Amazon. I'll put the link there for you guys too. This thing is super beefy and actually really cost effective and cheap comparative big name brands like Lokar. And you know, if you buy something from Summit, you can end up spending like $100 on this thing. And actually, I did spend $100 on an oil dipstick that I bought for the engine itself. This thing was a quarter of the price. So check out the link there. And this is specific for the AOD. They might have some other ones that are for other transmissions too, if you're not using an AOD. So take a look at this one. This one's pretty cool. It's great for any aftermarket applications. But I just slide this bad boy in. It actually has a couple of rubber O-rings there to hold things in place. And it's actually a pretty good snug fit. So I don't foresee this actually popping off. I can put that in and boom. And it's designed to be mounted on your firewall. Can't really see that there, but it's designed to mount it on your firewall. So you can actually bring this up like this and bolt it on like that, and you're good to go. And again, it's very bendable, just like this stuff here too as well. So yeah, so we are good to go. So then we're going to circle to the front of the transmission where it meets the actual engine. All right, guys, hang tight. We are going downhill now from here on. So, okay, this is where the torque converter goes. If you notice something different from this transmission, you're probably thinking, hey, this thing is circumcised. So normally these cars come with two-piece input shafts. There's normally on these cars, there's another shaft, outer shaft that goes here, and then there's this middle one here. This transmission has had some work in the past, specific to the valve body at least. My brother is the one who gave me this transmission, gosh, maybe 15 years ago, I think, to the date, if not a little bit longer. He had it, again, this is from a 91 Mustang, so he had that in there, and he actually rebuilt the transmission. And as you guys saw there as I was putting in that shifter linkage, it does have some upgrades to it from Lentech. I don't know 100% what's there. I got to go back at some point and ask my brother what specifically he did to it, but I know it was completely rebuilt. So in addition, this would still have the two-piece input shaft, and if you guys are throwing any power at these AODs, especially the non-computer controlled ones, they have a tendency to break. The clutches aren't the best, so it has a lot of problems if you start throwing a bunch of power at it. I'm not going to have a ton of power out the gate. I do have some bolt-ons, but I'm probably still going to be under 400 horsepower or right at 400 horsepower. But nonetheless, I did upgrade the camshaft in it, and then it requires, due to the stall converter that I'll talk about next, it does require you to upgrade that. And just to future-proof this transmission, I went with the TCI Automotive input shaft. It's a one-piece, it's a hardened steel, so it's guaranteed, well, for the most part, based upon, as long as you're not throwing 1,000 horsepower at it, it's not going to break, you guys, and it simplifies this a little bit more. So now moving over here, this is the stall converter itself, And let's go a little bit closer here. This is again a TCI automotive stall converter. I ended up getting the same stall converter from the same manufacturer that makes the input shaft. This is a 2800 stall converter. The Anderson Motorsport camshaft dictated a higher stall speed. So I picked up this, actually I think it's 3200. Might be 3200 stall converter. So I picked this up to that way so it matches the camshaft and I won't have any issues there. This is the rear end gears that I have are 390s in the back with a 9-inch with an independent rear suspension. If you haven't seen that suspension on the Cougar, check out this link here on the upper right, and that'll take you to the walkthrough of the IRS that I put into the 68 Mercury Cougar, aka Camilla 68 Cougar. So, with that said, hey, this wraps up the transmission. My next step here is to make sure I can install this in the next day from here. And lastly, the last thing I will say is the bell housing spacer. Please make sure you get one specific to the AOD. If yours is bent and it's messed up or needs replacement, Summit Racing has a really good bell housing spacer that you can use. And you can make sure that it fits this, because when I initially installed this, I didn't realize that I had ordered a bell housing spacer for a manual transmission, and it didn't line up over here and I had to take everything down. But it was a blessing in disguise, because I found out that I needed to add all these accessories that you saw over here on the driver's side, the linkage and this bad boy here. So it's all good. So now I'm ready to go and I'm pumped. And I can't wait to guys to show you. Thanks for watching, guys. Check out my other videos. Check out my Instagram too. And thank you once again for hanging in and supporting this build. Talk to you guys later.